Welcome everybody to the August edition of Lakeside Chats. I'm going to just lean into what you just said, Doc. Okay, first of all, before we get started, Vana and I had a question, and since you were not able to join until we jump started.
Yes.
How professional are we today? Do we call you Dr. Charryse, or do we go with just Charryse, or do you want like some other really fancy name?
Just Charryse, or the fun name when we're really friends is Dr. Reese.
Dr. Reese.
Okay, Dr. Reese, because a lot of times people have a hard time pronouncing my name, so it doesn't matter. Yeah.
All right. Well, let's see
what feels good for you.
You at some point you're like, you give me the trigger point. Like if all of a sudden we're to the 30-way point, you're like, we're at Reese level. We're going.
Yeah.
We're going.
Yeah. I feel like we should start where we want to end. Let's just do Dr. Reese.
Perfect.
That's easy.
I'm on it. That sounds great. Yeah. All right. Well, we had over 120 people register for today's event, which is amazing, which I think is a true testament to not only the credibility that both of you bring to this topic, but also to the topic at large, right? And I think especially considering the fact of how we've presented it through the lens of like AI is changing the landscape for not just HR professionals, but for employees, and then how HR is handling and managing those employees on a regular basis, which is in theory why we're back talking about AI and HR. I will be honest, when I started Lakeside Chats, January of 2024, I avoided the AI topic for nearly 20 months because it felt like every organization was doing a topic on AI. Artificial intelligence was everywhere, and I was trying to sort of, be nonconformist in my own way. And so I avoided it for a long time, and then it felt like we got to a point where we just couldn't avoid it anymore. And now I'm envisioning that we're probably going to see this return itself with a 3.0 when we get to 2027 as well. For those of you, and just to sort of kick off, again, today's topic is AI and HR, leading people in an AI workplace. I like to kick off these events before I do introductions because I want to remind people on the front end that this event is in fact being recorded. So again, for people that are joining, I want to just remind people right out the very gate that this is a public session. As you know, as you registered, again, we will put this out on Lakeside's website as well as on our YouTube channel for future viewing, and I will send those links out in follow-up. So don't ask the question if you're going to need to get anything. You'll get the link if you want to share it, or if you have to leave early or something, you'll get the full link and access to where this lives after the event today as well. The other thing I try to do throughout it is one of the things that we recognize is this isn't truly a conversation. It is a chat for the vein of what a chat really looks like. And throughout a chat, you guys as participants, us as guests, may highlight an article, we might highlight a website, a book, a quote, something. I will make sure that those get captured in the follow-up material as well. Today's deck will also be provided in a PDF format. So just so you guys know in advance, all of those questions are easy to answer right out the front gate of it all. If you are new to Lakeside Chats, which I realize as I'm looking through the list, we do have some new names, which is exciting. Lakeside Chats are intended to be as much bidirectional as we want them to be. So we want you to engage with the team features as much as possible. So raise your hand if you have a question, use the chat feature if you have a comment. We're going to engage you with some questions throughout today's conversation as well. We want you guys to be able to respond because the only way a true conversation works is if everybody engages. And so that's what we want you to make sure you're using throughout. You will notice that your cameras are off and your mics are off as you join, but I may at some point ask you to just speak up if you have some super intelligent or crazy poignant comment in the chat, and your mics are allowed to be turned off. Cameras stay in the locked and seated position. The other thing I'll remind you of is that we encourage positive discussion and genuine curiosity. For those of you that are, thanks for letting me know, Debbie. One of the core values here at Lakeside is being curious. And so we recognize that part of the reason why we host these events is to really lean into our curiosity. We recognize that Vana, now Reese, now that we're at Dr. Reese, I'm going to guess that we are not the foremost experts on anything, right? We all are recognizing that we are all learning throughout. And so there are no right answers here, and that's okay. The end for goal of these sessions are always for information gathering and conversation starting. We hope that beyond today's conversation, you leave wanting to continue this conversation and bringing this up in your workplaces and in groups that you're a part of. All right, with that though, I want to introduce my beautiful new friend, or my beautiful new friend, and my long-term colleague, Vana. Vana, I'm just going to consider you a long-term friend now here too. So, two people that I've been really excited about bringing this together. I want to sort of kick off with the idea that there's some serendipity to how this conversation came to be. I met with Cadre's founder, Luke, before I met with Dr. Reese. I'm gonna have to go get there. You're on mute. You're on mute, girlfriend.
And you can say Charryse if that's easier for you. We don't want to make it complicated.
I'll get there.
Yeah.
He and I had met, and he was talking about the great work that Dr. Charryse is doing at Cadre, and in the vein of what's happening in AI and what AI is doing to the mental health component to our employees. And I found completely fascinating. And then I think I left that coffee meeting and hopped on a meeting with our consulting team where Vana was talking and showing off some of the ways that she's leveraging AI in her consulting role. And I was like, it feels like it's time. I feel like if the world is telling me anything, this is where the world is telling me to go. And so that's why the three of us are here today. It's really, like I said, a serendipitous day for me that really recognized that this was the conversation we needed to continue to have. As I mentioned to the two of you on the front end, I am a big believer in not, I get uncomfortable when someone reads my bio in front of me, so I don't do your bio. So Dr. Charryse, do you want to just introduce yourself and your role and sort of your background? And then Vana will let you go next.
Absolutely. I'm Dr. Charryse Johnson. I'm the Chief Clinical Officer at Cadre. I'm also a behavioral systems strategist. So I spend about half my time working one-on-one, and then the other majority of my time working with organizations around well-being and implementing AI in a human advantage, 51% human dynamic, and teams that are also navigating crisis and adaptability. How do you continue to not just stay current, but make sure that you're keeping people at the center of that change? And so along with that, do a lot of keynote speaking and developed a coaching framework that'll actually be piloted by Blue Cross Blue Shield of Minnesota here within the next few weeks. We're getting that close.
That's so exciting.
Yeah.
Vana, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure, thanks. Good morning. I'm Vana Greischar. I am a senior HR consultant with Lakeside HR Group. I think I'm coming on 2 years with Lakeside this fall. I've been in the HR space for probably 15 years. And I really describe what I do by saying I'm the calm in the storm for my clients. Like I bring them the calm and we work through things together.
It's a good way to, I think that you kind of bring that everywhere you are, Vana. I feel like there's an element that doesn't just apply to your clients. I feel like that applies to even being on our team as well. There's this sort of like, we got this sort of vibe to Vana. So when you were this morning saying that your palms were sweaty, I'm like, that doesn't even sound like you. Like you're usually like the cool, calm,
I know.
You're Superwoman. How is that possible?
This is like a small wedding, like standing up and giving a toast at a small wedding.
Yeah.
62 people who all asked to be here. So I think that means something as well. I want to kick off too with the idea that, again, so those of you that are new to understanding so as Vana referenced too, she's here at Lakeside. I'm Director of Business Development here at Lakeside as well. I'm kicking into my third year. I'll be 3 years at the end of November. Lakeside as an organization, I have a mission statement to strengthen small to mid-sized businesses through personalized recruiting and HR consulting solutions. We have two different divisions. We have a recruiting division that primarily does a lot of contingency recruiting and some fractional recruiting. And then Vana, as you're going to get to hear more about her role and the work that she's doing, we have an HR consulting division that, to her point, I think that's a good way to put it. Hopefully you and others on that team bring that calm to the storm piece of it, is the idea that we become an extension of a team when they either don't have an HR team or have a small HR team and need extra set of hands. I've already referenced one of our core values, but we are genuine, curious, scrappy value adders. Scrappy showed up already this morning as we were trying to quickly get Charryse into today's call, but we are here and Scrappy works to our advantage and everything is good. So I feel like that is, hopefully you'll see all four of those values show up in today's session as well. Additionally, I lead, and along with Kristen, we lead an organization called Radiate People. Radiate People is a solopreneur cohort group. So again, if you're interested in learning more about Radiate People, reach out to me and I'm happy to provide you some more context on that as well. All right. Now it's your guys' turn to engage. So we've got two highlighted top of the event questions for our audience to engage with. First question for you guys, this is an easy one. How often are you using AI tools today? And so you have 4 options, and get creative if you want to give me an answer beyond the 4 options. Are you using them every week? Are you using them every day? Are you using them every hour? Or are they just a constant, maybe a constant tab opened in your web browser on a regular basis? I love this.
I love it. My ADHD superpower.
Yes, I think it's appropriate. I would tell her I feel like I'm in a very similar situation.
Okay.
Like I feel like it just lives in my constantly, we've got daily, constant, daily. Okay, so I'm going to ask this question through a different lens. This is where Scrappy shows up.
Yeah.
Would you have, if we had done AI and HR, when we did AI and HR a year ago, would your answer been different or would it have been the same? I feel like for me, mine has gone from probably constantly to maybe daily and for sure weekly before that. Much different. Yep. Deb, same. We've got some, I think but I think it's increased. I think it's perfect. I think that to me, that evolution of what's happened and sort of how much it's becoming more embedded into our existence and sort of the expectations of work is a true testament. Charryse, I'm curious from where you sit. Are you surprised? Is this sort of what you would have expected to see based on your
Yeah, no, this is on par with what I would expect to see. I think the year mark is kind of really interesting to look at because so much has changed in a year. A lot of times what I hear is people also kind of feel like I've had no choice because one big core piece of using AI tools is it increases productivity. So that increases the demands. So in order for people to now keep up with the demands, I'm seeing a lot of people who are like, I don't know where to start, or I wasn't using it as much. What are the ways that I can use it so I can still hit the metrics and the expectations? So I think it's right on par.
Vana, how did you answer from a year ago to today? What do you think?
Yeah, I would say a year ago, I was using daily to some degree, maybe a couple times a week, and now it's daily to hourly depending on what I'm working on.
Yeah. All right, so now let's ask the other question around what is it that you're using, right? So now the other question of the hour is what AI tools are you using regularly? What is the tab that's open on your web browser? What are to your point, Ben, I love that comment too, because I think the other part of it is we're seeing AI tools get embedded, right? We're now in a position where it's not just that you're not having to actively open a browser or actively have to go there. Yeah. Now we're seeing them fully embedded into our existing platforms that we were already using. And now we're sort of using, I mean, Copilot's a great example.
Copilot,
right?
Gemini, yeah. Even Grammarly is technically considered AI. And, you know, most people don't realize that, but we've been using that for years, but it's elevated. Like it now shows up whether you ask for it or not.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think I think I joked with, that was my segue to letting my husband feel more comfortable with AI. He would have been none, if at all, a year ago. And I think now probably more to weekly. And I think I said to him the same thing. I'm like, you've never used the little squiggly line underneath your sentence or your word to change it because there was a spell check issue? Guess what? That was early form AI, right? That's just some artificial intelligence telling you did something wrong. Now, it's not generative and it's not all the things, but even the idea of like, do you want to add this to your dictionary? In theory, there's some element of like, it was the early form of what AI looked like in our day-to-day lives. Yeah. I was hoping maybe we'd see some new ones, but I'm not seeing any. We've got Deb's Perplexity. I was curious if we'd see a Perplexity.
Oh yeah, I love Perplexity. That's a good one.
I'm not using that one as much. I feel like I've dabbled, but not as much as I. Oh, sorry, I got excited there. 2 screens, 1 cursor. I'm always curious to see what people are saying from a Gemini perspective. I'm of the nature where I go to Gemini for images, like if I need to create an image piece of
Yeah.
it, but I can chat or Claude when I need to create content or organization. Like I feel
Yeah.
like, and I'm now, I mean, I would say I would add for me, the HubSpot Breeze, because I've used HubSpot for our CRM. The
Yeah.
AI function within HubSpot has been super helpful.
Mhm.
I'm using, if I hop on Google and I ask a question, I'll immediately switch it to AI mode. Like I feel like I'm
Yeah.
now sort of setting it.
Firefly, yep, Zoom
Yep.
AI. Salesforce also has Agentforce, which is the CRM, and that's an AI. I'm surprised that we don't necessarily see that here. And then there's another one called GitHub, GIT Hub, like a version of Copilot. That's
Yep.
also another resource, and especially if anyone's in business and technology, that helps review code. So that can be super helpful as well.
Interesting. Awesome. All right. Well, let's keep going. This is great. I feel like this is exactly where we wanted to go. All right. Employee impact of AI. So I like to sometimes start with either facts or articles or news pieces that I'm seeing. And I'm guessing, Charryse, this is probably part of why your role at Cadre has come to fruition. So I brought up a couple sort of articles that I thought were sort of interesting. So what first one on the front end is the share of employees that are frequently using AI. Found it super interesting that the people that are using AI the most are our leaders, right? I think that, and I'm curious, Vana, from your lens, especially working with so many different types of companies, what has been your perspective on the leader role and version of using AI?
Yeah, I would say one organization that I support is very top down with AI. And so really starting at that VP level in terms of discovery, understanding what it can do for the business. And then they've really opened up access and done some training and really they've dove in pretty deep right now in their use of Claude professionally. But really it started with a senior leader really showing the benefits for the organization.
Yeah. Charryse, from your lens, and I feel like part of the reason why, again, as you and I got connected, I kept thinking about this lens of the mental health side of it, or even just the anxiety that employees, as you look at the individual contributors as by comparison to the manager or the leader role, there's this like, I don't know if I'm doing it right, or I don't know if I'm using it in the right way, or if I can use it, and if I'm supposed to even say I'm using it. Do you think that's part of why we see this, 21% variance between individual contributors and leaders?
I definitely think that's part of why. I think it also depends on the organization. Honestly, the ages, the generations within the organization can also play a big role. If we look at some of the demographic data, sometimes individuals that we have, not always, but sometimes managers and project managers are in a generation where they're less familiar with AI. So they also feel like we didn't always need this. I hear what you're trying to do, but there might be a little bit more resistance. So I'm often brought in to help support. This doesn't mean that you're not necessarily going to have a job in a few years, because that ends up being a concern for a lot of individuals. But I do think part of it is that leaders, step out, understand the productivity, are looking at ways to be more efficient, and it takes time to get that top down with confidence for sure.
Yeah. I want to sort of lean into the other two data points. These are, again, relatively recent articles, ones that have just come out in the last couple of weeks, around the idea of anxiety from employers, and then the idea of depressive symptoms associated to AI usage. Charryse, do you want to speak to that just at its highest level, before we even get into your formality of it all?
Yeah, one of the things about AI was initially created to just center on basic kind of efficiency and productivity. However, as we've tracked data over time, we now know that the top use cases are often for personal dynamics. And so while people are spending so much more time on AI and using it sometimes in helpful ways, whether that's personally or professionally, what we're also seeing is they're more disconnected. So you might think like we have all of this information, but it's this kind of one-to-one information. We even think about the dynamic of communication. So we're engaging with something that is going to speak things back to us, exactly the way that we want to hear it. And even if it's saying something that we don't like, it's still going to frame it in a way that's challenging. So some of those depressive symptoms there's still a disconnect in our nervous system. Big into neuroscience won't overdo it. Neurobiologically, we are not designed to engage at this level with technology. So there is an allostatic load, there's a nervous system dynamic that almost dulls us because things aren't firing off the same way that they would be if we were using our brain for a lot of these things. So it can make these things easy, but there's a trail off. And then we also aren't connecting with people the way that we used to. We hear the dynamic of an AI or chat companion. That is becoming true, but then outside of that, those connections aren't there as much.
So do you think, as I'm hearing you say that, so is there, I want to sort of restate what I heard you say there. So is part of this the idea that we're getting validated by our AI counterpart, right? So we're getting sort of like going to our AI counterpart for validation or for thought partnership, if nothing else, but they're essentially validating what we're saying on the front end so that when we do go to a non-AI function and they critique or they don't see it the same way, there feels like a disconnect between sort of like, well, this told me everything was great, and now you're telling me it's wrong. So now I'm feeling like I don't know, I can't compute.
Yeah, that can be part of it. Another part of it is to consider that this AI use has increased coming off of COVID. So during COVID, we became very much a hybrid workforce. So we weren't also having those same dynamics of community. You're not meeting people for lunch and different things as much unless you're being intentional. So even that isolation adds to it. So we're getting things done. The AI use is there, but maybe that has shifted the way businesses run. So there's not an office. You don't have connection. We're wired to have connection. And when we have less connection as well, that also emotionally does something to us. So it's not just that one factor. You restated that well, but it's multiple factors, and these are a few of them.
So interesting. I mean, and it's so real. Like, I think there's an element of it. It's interesting because I feel like you're like, I can see it, right? I can totally understand it. And I think as many of us have already attested to, we're using these bots, these agents on a day-to-day basis, if not an hourly basis. And so the idea that we are sort of isolating ourselves from true person-to-person brainstorming or person-to-person content. It's fascinating. All right. I want to sort of go into that. So knowing that that's the case, right? We've mentioned a couple of these things already on the front end, people being worried that AI could replace their job. So raise your hand, say yes, whatever it is. In your role, have you been somebody who's been worried that AI could replace your role? Not all at once. Got a couple hand raises. I like it. Oh, we like it. We've got a lot of no's.
Got a lot of no's. Interesting.
I love this. A lot of no's, which is great to see. Because again, I feel like there's been, I think we hear it, right? We've seen it, or especially coming out of last year's reduction in force with some of the bigger companies. I mean, you look at even Amazon for example, there was an attestant to the idea that it was replacing an AI role. But again, knowing our audience, my guess is we've got a different level of professionalism and audiences here as well. All right. Have you ever worried that you have mis or overused AI for a project? So if you're somebody who's at work and all of a sudden you've leaned into AI as a tool, have you worried that it's been something that you've potentially overused or maybe given maybe too much data or information about your company?
I have a funny story kind of related to this question.
Yeah,
not worried that I missed or overused it, but I am finding that since AI is out there, if you are a good writer, there is an assumption that you have used AI. So I remember submitting something for an article and then them, which I knew they couldn't have read it fast enough to come back with, did you use AI for this? And it wasn't like this general question. They were like, we read that And then I literally had to kind of like show them. And I was like, this came from my own work, my own dissertation. So one of the things we're seeing though is a lot of academics or people who are like, I've always known how to write and speak well, are now being accused of mis or overusing AI. And that's tough.
Yeah. All right, next one. Worried that your job will be obsolete due to AI. So again, not worried that AI is going to take your job, but that at some point AI is not, that your job won't be needed at all in the future due to AI. More no's again. Got a confident group here. I like it.
I'm so curious. I like want to know what everybody does. This is probably the most no's I have seen in a group setting around these questions.
Yeah.
They're probably all, I think they're mostly probably HR people, and they know that that human element is
Okay. Is
really
so
important.
for,
Yeah.
okay.
I want to just lean into what Deb said, though. I think there's an element of what she's like, there's so much to those 5 words, not in current AI, not with current AI. It's such a great way to put it, Deb, through that lens of being able to say that, you know, we all know, right? As soon as we're talking about it, which is, I think, part of the reason I've struggled with any time doing a tech talk on AI, is as soon as you tell someone to do something, it's already changing, right? Because you fed it new data and now it's changed. And so I think that's probably the most apropos, or maybe sort of the most like futuristic viewpoint of it, is that and Becky says the same thing, as it exists, maybe. And Erin feels differently because she's in marketing, so I can appreciate it. All right, let's jump in because I want, Charryse, I want you to talk a little bit about the Cadre way,
Sure.
and what you've created, and also what you're bringing to Blue Cross Blue Shield. I think it's fascinating to hear that this is coming out of a brain where the work that you've done, and then where it's going. So can you speak a little bit more about the Cadre way?
Yeah, the Cadre Way is essentially a framework for supporting humans, and it really centers around what I like to call the missing middle. So it doesn't mean that you're like doing terrible, but also you're not doing the best you can ever. The goal behind it was to really make sure that as we're also seeing a lot of changes in insurance coverage for organizations not being able to necessarily afford the same kind of programs and clinical health support, mental health support that they were. I wanted to create something that was evidence-based and would really get people as close as possible to evidence-based, measurable coaching, so that if someone had insurance but still couldn't afford to pay the deductible, because that's a real deal in the copay, they would still have access to care. And so the Cadre Way is centered around things like community, access, respect, dignity, empathy, and really goes through a framework of helping any individual at any age look at how we can support them, but look at, are there any barriers to the kind of support that they need? How do we do this in a way that can either be done by phone or by computer, also taking some of those technology dynamics off, and when necessary, making sure that they get to a human. In my role, you know, as a clinical therapist, even in business, one of the things that I'm concerned about is AI and mental health is a top use case. It's the number one top use and kind of issue that people are taking into an AI tool. And so working with different organizations or working with businesses as they're building AI to go, what are your safety guards? You know, what are your safety rails? What helps them know, okay, based on what you just said, we need to get you to a human. And so that's also at the core of the Cadre Way, because people will share a lot of information there. It's vulnerability that doesn't really cost them anything. And I want to make sure that someone's not suffering putting that information into something and not getting the support that they need. So it kind of takes them from support to a human as needed.
Talk to me about so again, I'm curious to know the
What that would
catalyst.
look like.
Well, how does that look like in execution from an employer to employee perspective?
Yeah. So let's say, for example, when we start their pilot with Blue Cross Blue Shield, anyone that is a part of Blue Cross Blue Shield of Minnesota with that particular coverage will have the option to utilize support, right? What that might mean is they're having a difficult time. They reach out to their case manager or look on the back of their card and they say, we have Cadre here, which is a social media mental health app that you are able to use free of charge. It doesn't follow your algorithm. It's not going to sell you anything. There are no ads. It's literally just focused on a balance of like clinical care, lived experience, and you're kind of engaging with videos or live streams from there. Along the way, you might see a different star or symbol on the individuals like myself that are trained coaches, because there's a level of fidelity and quality assurance that is here. And if you say, I would like to meet with a coach, this has been great, but I believe that I have some things that would be more ideal one-on-one, you're able to then go on, see the coaches, see kind of what their specialties are, reach out to one of those coaches. We then kind of reconnect with them, do a quick assessment to make sure that what they need is coaching versus counseling, because there is a big difference. And if it's well within the line of coaching, then essentially they would set up time to work with that individual and then kind of set goals from there. If it's something where we know someone is absolutely depressed, then we would say, we want to connect you with a therapist, but we will work with your case manager to find that for you. Because part of the overwhelm is you've done all that, you've stepped out, and then it's this big, long process. But if they do coaching, for example, that is already covered by their benefit, there's not an additional charge, they get that help and they're able to kind of walk through that situation. So making it very seamless, and it can kind of go back and forth where we're going to be able to exchange and work hand in hand with the case managers at Blue Cross Blue Shield, making sure that no one gets lost in the system. Or how many times have you needed something and you feel like, I just gave this person all of my information and then I got to the next line and that person asked me for the same information? I don't know about you, that drives me up a wall. So one of the things that we are making sure is that they know, here's the information that, with your permission, we are going to share with them. Very basic, nothing that they don't necessarily always have, but it just saves you the process of feeling like you're starting all over and getting frustrated, just to make it easier. I think it's also going to be really great for families or people, that maybe they have the support, but maybe they have a child at college or a husband who works third shift. This is available to all and they can access it at any time.
I want to sort of go back to something you'd said on the front end, the idea that like AI is sort of becoming the
one of the top use cases.
Mental health use cases.
Yeah.
Can I sort of unpack that a little bit? Because I'm curious to just get a little bit of a sort of how does that intersect with where this has gone?
Yeah. So where this has gone in terms of
in terms of where how it's sort of kind of where use cases are changing, maybe in terms of
use cases are definitely changing, because again, essentially when people were initially doing AI, it was for productivity. It was help me map this out, my dinner recipes, or help me take this information and put it into a useful tool for me to plan out this project. And they might have that in their chat or their Claude. Then somewhere in their chat or their Claude, they also have, here's the situation that I'm dealing with somebody at work, right? Here's the situation that I'm dealing with somebody at home. So we even have dynamics where they're going to chat versus even going to like an HR leader or the proper channels that are there. And the general things that are in place right now are not going to say, hey, this really sounds like something you should go and talk to your HR leader about and really get their approach and see what's specific to you. And so that was part of, before things even got crazy, was something that I was already working on and noticing with younger individuals. And then once we got the latest data, we realized like, no, this is everywhere. And it's not just with younger individuals. We're absolutely seeing this with adults at every age, and specifically between 40 and 60. We're seeing it the highest. So there's a lot of hidden information in there. So just really working with organizations as well on how do they embed things into what they're doing to make sure that those protective pieces are in there. AI has grown so fast, and of course, it's outpaced any kind of governance or any kind of regulations around it. So, while we recognize that, the other thing was it's still ethical. Cadre wanted to do coaches, and I said, that's fine. But if I'm on your app as a clinical therapist, I need to know that the coaches that you have, those people are trained. They know what to look for. They know what to hear that says this is outside of my scope. One other thing that I'll say, and then I'll be quiet. I also find, and you can say if this is true as well, Vana, a lot of managers often find themselves in situations where they're having to play, and sometimes HR leaders, the role of therapists and the role of mental health support, and very much feel like, I care for you and I want to help you, but this is outside what I can do. So we also want this to be a source that someone says, thank you for letting me know what's going on. Yes, we have EAP, but here is something that we have as well that can support you, because we are seeing data that says people are not utilizing EAP, but they'll go to an app. So
Yeah.
we're just shifting to where we know they will go, and then kind of finding another way to support them. I know that was long, but
No, that's great. I'm
Yeah.
curious I think there was two things I wanted to pull from that I wanted to get your line of sight to. One, what she just said, right? This idea of where our managers and or HR leaders sort of picking up, where, I mean, to your point, I mean, I think what you said is, I would be a liar if I didn't say I'm not guilty of everything you just said, right? Sometimes I go to my trusty friend Chad on ChatGPT and start there to sort of like process through what I'm thinking. And then I go to the person, or then I go to my manager, or then I go to my husband, whatever it might be, right? Like some of that is happening and I'm totally guilty of it. But Van, I'm curious from your lens, do you feel like from an HR / somebody who's coaching managers, do you feel like that they're seeing that as well?
Yes, whether we're seeing it, it's happening, behind the scenes. And when I think about organizations that sign up for an enterprise AI plan, for example, putting guardrails around that is really important. You could upload the whole handbook and create an interface that would allow someone to ask those questions of the handbook and actually output real responses for how to go about addressing things, or asking a question, or finding the right resource, or how do I get on the Cadre app, right? Like it could be an on-demand resource, but in the right way. And if there aren't those guardrails and people are just freely using their own tools, like we can't control the direction in which they're being pointed.
Yeah.
Which is, I think, where I was going to take the other question to you, Vana, is the comment she made about outpacing governance. I love that phrase, because I think that's exactly what you just said too. There's this concept of the guardrails, but then there's this governance factor of, we know that it is almost a living, breathing organism in and of itself. So how are you seeing, and I know we'll get into this more here in a little bit, but from the lens of what she just talked about, with the idea of outpacing governance in terms of where the role of HR sits.
Yeah, it is outpacing. It's outpacing governance at the state, the federal level within organizations. One of my clients that I can speak to is they're running ahead on AI without a lot of those guardrails in place yet. And so what they're finding is maybe their output is not in alignment with brand standards or expectations. And then they're not showing up in the marketplace the same way across different clients that they're, proposing to. And without a clear no policy, there's no framework for who gets what access and at what level. And these AI tools right now, they're paid by a monthly subscription, but I don't think it's always going to be that way. I think it's going to go usage based, where you're going to pay for the actual usage and not at a tier. And so it's going to become really important that organizations are very defined in terms of who's getting AI, for what purpose, what level, what tool. And we need to get ahead of that. Otherwise, it's really hard to unwind giving everybody, Claude Fable access. Unlimited.
Because you can still, organizations can still be held liable even without the policy. So there's so much litigation out there already for just the very thing that you talked about. So a lot of times I will take this Cadre Wave framework and work with a CAIO, and go like, it has to be part of the conversation. We can no longer just do technology over here and people over here. Like, we need to be at the table together and really looking at what are the implications if this person has total and complete access to all of these things. And then what are you also doing with that information? Is it stored somewhere secure? What happens if something breaks down or if it evolves? We can't afford not to think about it, because people will get hurt, right?
Yeah.
If we don't.
comment on the chat that I wanted to bring to both of you is around manager training, making sure that we're in a position to make sure that not only are we, I think that there's a use case, I mean, there's the use case guardrails that you talked about, Vana, but I'm curious as to know, are we also in a position to make sure that those managers are, they understand the guardrails and that they are managing to the guardrails too. Curious to, and you guys can take it amongst yourselves to sort of react to that statement.
I think like if we're writing guardrails into a policy and then rolling that out in a hour-long presentation to managers, like we're not leveraging AI the way it should be. Like that framework and those guardrails should be in the tool. And then it's not so much then leaning on people to make the right decisions. It's AI pushing back or not providing certain levels of detail potentially. So being able to customize your AI tool to your organization and what your expectations are for your people.
Yeah, one of the things that I'm seeing in terms of training managers is a lot of that depends on the organization and the finances that they have set aside for that. That is one of the biggest challenges. So I've never come across personally in my work an organization that didn't want to or didn't find it important, but they have to allocate and be willing to invest in. This isn't just about training your manager how to use the tool. It's very much what this person is saying, HP is saying, it's helping train them on what does it look like for a manager to now lead a hybrid workforce. They're now leading people and a synthetic workforce based on the language that we now use. What does that look like? How do you teach people there when all they're often told is, we need to start using this and this is why? So I think that is a gap that we're working to fill. So if somebody needs support in that, definitely reach out to me. But that is a very big piece and that puts a lot of stress on managers and leaders for sure.
I know we're going to get into this here in a little bit, Vana, but I don't want to lose Kristen's question here of when AI is used to support employment decisions, what does HR need to document and validate to make those decisions legally defensible? I know that neither of you are attorneys. We have a doctor and a non-attorney. Does have all sorts of lovely credentials behind her, but she's not an attorney. But Vana, what would you have advised when people are questioning that, the defensible piece of it from an HR lens?
I probably have more questions than answers on this one. Like in what way is the tool being used to support an employment decision? And I think if it's a thought partner, fine. But like at the end of the day, ball rolls uphill on that one. Like we're not able to point to AI and say, oh, this, but honestly, like I would not probably use AI in employment decisions per se.
Yeah, I think that's a fair statement. I want to keep moving because I know we've got some good content and I want to just get to the next question for the room. And that's to this, I mean, I think it's appropriate sort of segue to what we were just talking about is, does your company or does your employer have an AI policy? And do you know it? So yeah, good questions here. And I'm already seeing yeses, which makes me happy, but curious from your guys' lens, do you guys have an HR policy? Good, we're talking about it. Good job, Nicole. A lot of yeses. This is great. Awesome. Well, good. Well, good work, everybody. Way to get ahead of the policy. And I think that's going to be part of what we're going to talk about here next is, and Vana, I'm going to sort of let you take the lead on this one because I recognize that some of this is, we recognize that AI isn't just a technology conversation. We're already sort of there with some of where this conversation has gone. It is a mental health conversation. It is a use case conversation. It is an engagement conversation, right? I think that Charryse, what you were saying too, is this idea of, how are people actually engaging one-to-one? Do you want to talk about sort of some of the sort of evolution that's happening kind of behind the scenes, Vana, in terms of what the bullets that we've got here on the slide?
Sure. Well, being that I'm based in Minnesota, Lakeside's based in Minnesota, I thought it pertinent to bring forward that there's a bill that proposes some guardrails for employers around AI and providing a 90-day notice to employees whose role is impacted due to AI, and provide transition support when they're displaced with reskilling during a certain period during that 90-day notice. So there's an investment that could be required on the employer's side if the implementation of AI tools affects their workforce. So that's Minnesota. I'm sure we're not the only state. I didn't dive into other states, but
Charryse, have you seen anything similar? I know you're out of state. Have you seen or heard of anything similar in other states?
I am seeing other states move towards something very similar where there is a period, it varies right from state to state, but that's definitely a growing dynamic. And then they're at least at the national level also working towards grants that can help people, very much to what you're saying, reskill, right? How do they pivot if they feel like the area that they're in no longer looks the same? Because there is a lot of data around, not a concern now, but this may look different in the future. So how do you also kind of diversify what you're able to do? But there has to be, and there is something in place, or people are working towards putting it in place in other states.
There's a question in the chat from Jill.
Yeah.
She asks, is this based on the location of the organization or the employee's work location? I would have to double check on that and let you know. Again, it's not passed. It's sitting out. I think it's in the House. So know that it might be coming, and it might not look exactly the way it looks right now.
We all just went through many of those evolutions in previous years with regards to having bills waiting to get passed. But I think it's one of those ones where it's good for us to know so that we can keep an eye out on how that's being divined. So great question, Jill.
Yeah, absolutely. So then at a federal level, the federal government is working on Charryse, make America AI ready?
Yes.
Great. So I will say the one piece I decided to pull into this slide deck is more so for really anybody at any level of AI literacy, but also folks that are like not using AI today that have no idea what it is. I think about my mom and dad, although they are actually using AI quite a bit. How do we get folks like that this is so new and so scary? How do we get them comfortable at a very baseline level? And so you could sign up for this AI literacy course that's 100% through text messages, and it's not bad. Like
I did it, and it will remind you if you don't.
Right. Yeah, they're it's in very insistent. Like if you don't respond, it'll follow up. But it's a good baseline. It's free. There's other resources that at a federal level that they're pulling together as well. But I always like to remind, organizations of those tools. Let's see. So what's this other one? I listened to an NPR newscast. This was last week, I think. And they had Bernie Sanders on first, and then they had Aaron Brockovich on next. So what is happening at the federal level is these data centers are becoming prolific, basically, across the United States. There's a lot of unknowns about them. There's a lot of concerns from an environmental standpoint, from a resource standpoint, from a health standpoint. And so if we look back 12 months ago, that landscape was go, 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 get them built. There's like zero guardrails, no regulation, really. Just do it in a way that like consumes as much energy as possible is sort of where they're at in the engineering of these. But we all know that there's better ways to do this work. And so now there's actually a little bit of a stop work coming across states in which top down, they're saying, hey, we're putting a moratorium on data centers. We're not approving anymore. We're not building anymore until we figure out the actual construction of these data centers and their impact to the communities in which they're showing up. And if you're interested in this, Erin Brockovich has a website in which she has a map of all the data centers across the US, and you can see it's like red with dots. but she's out there, fighting the fight around the impact to these communities.
And I think it's important for us to pay attention to the data centers and what they do. I think it's easy to hear about it and not really connect it to how it can impact you personally. But I know before Minneapolis, I lived in Charlotte, North Carolina, and there was a lot of fights to get data centers or stop them from being built for good reason. There are still a lot of implications in some of the places where there are currently data centers have experienced enough things that there's evidence around to proceed with some caution. So I definitely feel like it's a piece that would be helpful for everybody just to be informed, because, in order to get them in place, they can do a due diligence and say, well, we put it out there and only 2% of people said that they had an issue with it, so we're moving forward. And so it's just making sure that we stay informed.
Yeah. It's fascinating too, because I feel like the first couple, even I think it got brought up even on the AI in HR event last year when we were talking about the ethical use of AI. So if you haven't gone back, and for those of you that are curious, we did the same sort of event about a year ago. Christy, who I think is on today, was one of our speakers. We talked specifically about the idea of that ethical use case in terms of one of the things that we just have to recognize. It feels computer-based and it feels insular to the space you're in when you're having this conversation, but there is this economic and environmental implication of every time you're using it. And so I agree. I think it's something we have to at least know in the back of our head, that there is this ethical element that we have to keep in mind, not just from a use case, what information we're giving it, but also ethical in terms of where is that being stored and what implications it's having environmentally. Last one. So again, the automation piece in China, Vana, do you want to talk a little bit about just the idea of, again, sort of you tie the first one to this last one, you start to see this juxtaposition of like, we're good that we're getting ahead of it and giving people 90 days, but we also recognize that automation, that the reality is true too, that there might be jobs that are going away.
Yeah. I do think that we can look back on where China was at in the early 2000s with robotics and AI. I actually studied abroad in college in 2007 to China, and we had a project in which we were trying to help a local CD-ROM manufacturer determine the viability of their business beyond the CD-ROM. And then they manufactured these CD-ROMs over in China. And so we visited the factory. I don't remember the end result of our presentation, but what I do remember is those factories. And, in looking at what China did at that time to support their workforce in their mental health, in reskilling, in supporting organizations in this transformation overall as a country, it I think eased some of the things that we're feeling right now with recursive and agentic AI. I think that we're at that point. We didn't really go through the robotics evolution per se here. And so I think there's something to be learned about creating self-efficacy and, ownership and independence in AI as a way to support employees.
Yeah. All right, so I know we've got 5 minutes left, and I realize that there's a lot of words on this slide. So I'm going to just sort of ask for more of a broad stroke of where do we see AR, not AR, it's AI and HR intersect. So what are some of the things that we can be doing and maybe I'll send the slide out, but I want to just sort of get your guys' sort of immediate reaction when you sit in the vein of sitting in the HR space, right? Whether you're Lakeside as a consultant or you're the benefits that you're being offered, right? The idea of them through the brokers or through the care that you're receiving. Where do we see the intersection? Vana, why don't you kick off this one? Where do you see sort of the immediate intersection that HR plays between the employee or the employer and AI?
Yeah, I think there's the parent answer, which is framework, communication, training, support, all of those things, a policy, regular revisiting of that policy and fine tuning. That's the simple stuff. I really think that AI is right now for people that are genuinely curious and have ideas. And so I want to encourage us as HR professionals or one marketing person, to to leverage AI to make our own processes like more seamless, more accurate, more like easy to do. And if I think about maintaining something as simple as a standard operating procedure as an HR department, like I've employed Claude and VS Code and did some vibe coding on my own and basically created a backend HTML in which I can, through written prompts, tell AI to update my SOP, add new things into the SOP, create, and it's just made that process so much easier. I think getting really organized in Claude is really important, and learning how to use project folders and skills and building your own skills to better represent your own work out there. Also, please tell your AI to stop using M dashes. Like that's the number one thing that I see out there. Like I know you used AI. If you're using an M dash, which does not exist on this keyboard,
Correct.
I know you used AI, and it's not a problem, but I just know that maybe you didn't look at it.
Yeah. I want to, Charryse, before I go to you, I want to sort of go to Chad's comment in the chat, because I think I want to just read it word for word and get your guys' reaction. I think that there's also a performance management aspect that AI can make an A player better while exposing weaknesses of a C player. They are no longer required to manually work through a problem. They may catch the inherent errors that will arise with AI. I've had to spend additional time reviewing work as a result of this. Charryse, what are your thoughts on that?
Agreed. Hear that, see that, work through that. That causes a challenge. I think if I look at just from my lens, the intersection of HR and AI, it is continuing to help support leaders and managers in supporting their employees, but also remembering people still need training. You know, remembering that you want to hire not just individuals who use AI well, because that critical thinking, communication, emotional intelligence, those things matter. So we also sometimes see that you'll have a staff and it's like they're brilliant when it comes to using the tools that they have, but their people skills and their soft skills are lacking. So making sure that those stay a primary part of what you're looking for as well. I'll say that.
Yeah, I think that's true. Any other final thoughts before we close this bad boy out? I think that was well put at the end. And I think the idea of there's an element of, I mean, the M dash thing, I think we've gotten all sorts of reactions to your M dash comment, Vana. But I think if I had to sort of put a big exclamation point on any one statement, or two statements actually from today, is that people still need training. I think that's a really good comment, is that the idea that AI is going to be the end all be all so that you can just go to AI and get the answer. I think we just still have to remind ourselves that there's still the need for training. And I think the other part of it is that recognition of outpacing governance. I think those to me are the two pieces that I think we have to just remind ourselves, which is, Vana, why I love how you talked about sort of this SOP constant state evolution, because we've now have the capabilities to stay a little more nimble versus feeling like an employee handbook that we spent all this time on, created this SOP, and this is now this static document, recognizing that things are going to change so regularly. As we've got people sort of hopping off for their 10 o'clock phone call, I want to just give everyone a heads up. Next month, we'll be back on Tuesday, September 22nd. And we're going to talk about fractional by function. The idea we've done, when to frac, WTF, a couple months ago or about a year ago. And now we want to sort of talk about the intersection of the different functions that we're seeing of fractional and how those functional areas work both together and where they can support each other along the way too. Great discussion. Thank you, Charryse.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vana. Vana, you have to introduce your cat.
She was pretty good through this call.
Very
So
good.
yeah, patience. This is patience. She's not
Aw.
patient. Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks, you guys. For those of
right,
you that are
thanks.
back, we'll make sure we get you the deck, the recording, all the things. Everyone have a wonderful day, and hopefully we'll see many of you next month. Bye, guys.
Thank you. Bye.